Hello everyone, welcome to this extremely uplifting and happy video, as you can tell by the title. I was inspired to make this video because there's this very strong prevalent myth in the United States that Canada is somehow this magical country that doesn't have the same problems, that is resistant to the Trump style of politics and the rise of the radical right happening all over the world. It's mostly propagated by centrist political writers in the United States who don't really have much to say except how much they gush over our center-right Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who, by the way, just recently signed a law into place that will make it harder for asylum seekers to apply for political asylum and refugee status in Canada. That's just great. But this isn't a video about Justin Trudeau. This is about the rise of the radical right and fascism in Canada. We are in an election year, and this is a growing and festering problem in our country. I want to give you guys a peek past the mythology of Canada as this magical place of tolerance and diversity and where everyone's accepted in this amazing way and nothing bad happens, and talk about some of the real problems that we have. And this is not a new phenomenon. There have always been a radical far right, and we're just seeing an uptick. It's coming back, not coming in for the first time. Canada has, for the longest time, had Nazis and neo-Nazis. Even though they are technically illegal groups here, they still operate and have operated in the past. If you want to see a good example, you should go and check out this video by Thought Slime about the Christie Pitts riot, which was about Nazis in Toronto. Canada also had the Ku Klux Klan pretty popular here. There's a city not too far from where I am now called London, Ontario, where the Ku Klux Klan operated in a huge capacity. Also, in the 1920s, they were very prominent in the province of Saskatchewan, to the point where there was even a federal MP elected who was a member. So what's going on now? Why is it becoming a crisis today? Well, ever since something happened in the United States, there's been this steady rise of white ethno-nationalism movements going on in Canada. According to hate crime statistics, there has been a 25 to 30% increase in hate crimes in Canada since 2016. And on top of that, there has been a similar increase in participation in hate groups and far-right groups. The thing, though, is that Canada, unlike the United States, has been very successful at sweeping its legacy of racism and hatred underneath the rug. We don't confront it and address it like Americans do. We think it's uncouth to talk about racism in polite society. We don't have well-funded organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center. We do have those who are trying to research hate crimes and trying to research hate groups, but they are nowhere near in size and scope as the United States has infrastructure for, and it's very widespread. There was a recent study that came out that showed that membership in these hate groups and these far-right groups are highly linked with institutions like the Canadian Armed Forces, and this rise in hate crimes in the last 3 years is specifically tied towards Jews and Muslims. Another case that might become a big deal is the Reddit issue of Our Canada. If there's anybody who knows about Canada's subreddit situation, Our Canada has a racism problem. Specifically, there's even a lot of signs a white nationalist is one of the moderators of it. And so Canadian Redditors who want a Canada subreddit had to make a new non-racist subreddit called R On Guard for Thee, just to deal with the fact that white nationalists and white supremacists have become such a ubiquitous presence on the subreddit R Canada. Not only that, though, we have the same kinds of shitty right-wing media and terrible pundits that Americans have all the time. We have Rebel Media, which is like our version of Breitbart, run by a far-right pundit by the name of Ezra Levant. And there are a lot of Canadian social media influencers who I'm sure you're familiar with, probably didn't know they were Canadian, but are responsible for spreading a lot of racist vitriol and horrible bile onto the internet. You've got Stefan Molyneux, who has for years been running a right-wing internet talk show and is now a open white nationalist. You've got Steven Crowder, the person who YouTube refuses to ban despite using constant homophobic slurs in a targeted campaign to attack a single LGBTQ plus creator, a decision that they made during Pride Month. Because just good job, YouTube, on that one. You've got the legendary transphobic Kermit the Frog professor Jordan Peterson, the founder of the Proud Boys, which is a neo-Nazi group that's prevalent in both Canada and the United States, Gavin McInnes. There's Faith Goldy, another white nationalist who ran for mayor of Toronto and got over 10,000 votes. And you've got Lauren Southern, the great replacement white nationalist fearmonger who has recently gone into retirement, who has been responsible for all sorts of spreading of horrible racist conspiracy theories, gone literally to places like the Mediterranean Sea to join a group of white nationalists who were trying to prevent refugees from crossing over, and also went to South Africa to spread the racist conspiracy theory that somehow white people are being hunted down by evil blacks. All right, we need to bring it back to Canada here. Let's talk a little bit about some of the more prevalent groups in this new rise of the Canadian far right. A lot of the legacy hate groups in Canada have actually disappeared over the years, mostly because they're illegal and oftentimes get banned, but the new hate groups have been able to propagate without much challenge from the government. In Quebec, there's Le Meute, which is the term for the pack, or like the wolf pack type thing. It's more or less an anti-Muslim hate group that is focused out of Quebec, has about 43,000 members on Facebook, and organizes things like boycotts of halal products. They try to stop any efforts to promote multiculturalism and spread racist conspiracy theories about the Muslim Brotherhood trying to gain support and take power in Canada. You've got the Yellow Vest movement, which started as a rather left-wing movement in France about income inequality and the disproportionate burden put on the poor when it comes to the transition to move off of fossil fuels that was not being put on the rich. In Canada and in the UK, it has metastasized into this far-right populist movement. It's turned into a huge group, mostly focused on Facebook, that is openly xenophobic, openly Islamophobic. And this Facebook group is run by someone who has a history of making anti-Semitic comments and having a background with racist activism. There's also a little bit of stuff in the Yellow Vest movement about trying to resist even the tiny things that the Trudeau government has tried to do even the smallest amount of things, about addressing the fact that we have 12 years to completely change our energy production to stop, the world from ending. The third group is a common sight at some of these Yellow Vest movements. It's a group called the Soldiers of Odin, which was started in Finland in 2015 by a actual neo-Nazi, but has spread to Canada in a pretty big way. The group in Quebec, the Soldiers of Odin in Quebec, are more openly pro-Nazi, but in Canada, the Soldiers of Odin have tried to rebrand and become just a community organization, but studies of the connections between these people and far-right groups and Nazis, and also if you look at their social media platforms and things like that, it's still openly xenophobic, openly racist, especially against Muslims. The group was started in Canada by overt white supremacists, but they've tried in 2017 to break off from the Soldiers of Odin proper and become their own splinter group that is anti-racist, but somehow still, wanting to shut down immigration, and especially from non-white countries, and attacking Muslims is apparently not racist to their mind. So I guess that's a thing, but they are trying to rebrand, and I'm hoping no one can see through them. It seems like Facebook has already banned them from their platform, so maybe the thin mask has disappeared. There is then the anti-Muslim hate group, the Three Percenters, which are an import from the United States. The Three Percenters started shortly after the election of Barack Obama. They are an attempt to make a paramilitary group to basically incite civil war against Obama for some reason. The really dangerous thing about the Three Percenters in Canada is that they are a prepper movement. They are doing illegal paramilitary training and stockpiling weapons, and that is a sign that you should be seriously concerned. And there are some hate group researchers in Canada who suspect that the Three Percenters might be the most dangerous hate group in Canada. Maybe the most dangerous hate group that has ever existed in Canada. And this has started to seep into normie politics. When the Conservative Party, after the 2015 election, was seeking a new leader, you had Kelly Leitch, who was an openly racist candidate trying to run for leader of the Conservative Party. And then you also had a frontrunner for a little bit, Maxime Bernier, who, after he lost the leadership of the Conservative Party, has then splintered off to make his own far-right People's Party of Canada, which has gotten in constant shit for basically having white nationalists in its ranks. Even during his campaign, he was using right-wing winks and nods, using terms like red pilling and all sorts of sort of hint words, dog whistles, if you will, towards especially the men's rights movement. In Ontario, we had an election last year in which, for the first time, we had a conservative leader who tried to touch the third rail of Canadian politics, social conservatism, and made common cause with social conservatives to get himself elected, and has made through on his promise to crack down on LGBTQ representation in the Ontario sex ed curriculum. He's also doubled down on cutting funds for helping the education and taking care of people with autism, and also has cut back on disability benefits. You know, stuff that goes the extra mile towards being shitty. And in Alberta, the two conservative parties that were divided, the Progressive Conservative Party and the Wild Rose Party, being a more far-right party, have actually unified into something called the United Conservative Party, and they recently had an election in which Jason Kenney was elected as the new premier, who's already had to deal with the fact that several UCP MLA candidates had connections to things like white nationalism and anti-immigration movements and things like that, and they had to be kicked out of the party promptly. And so, yeah, now hate and violence and this kind of horrible shit is starting to seep into everyday life. In January of 2017, there was a mass shooting at a mosque in Quebec City. In spring of 2018, an incel used a van in Toronto, not that far from here, to run over a bunch of innocent people. As I mentioned, Faith Goldie, a white nationalist, ran for mayor of Toronto and ended up getting over 10,000 votes. Quebec just passed Bill 21, which is going to ban people in public sector jobs from being able to wear religious garb, including hijabs, exclusively pretty much hijabs and turbans. There was violence at Toronto's Pride Parade just a couple weekends ago, and these hate groups are starting to become normal. Oh, and there's going to be an election this October. Fun, fun, fun. The Conservative Party is trying to embrace this kind of new politics, but also keep it at arm's length. They're really trying to have their cake and eat it too, and saying that they can bait far-right votes so they don't all go to the People's Party of Canada, that party I mentioned earlier. But they also don't want to be openly racist because they know that that would be improper in Canadian politics. It's probably because of Andrew Scheer, the leader of the party, is still uncomfortable with fully embracing those people, although he was elected leader of the party with a lot of help from people who worked at Rebel Media, that organization that I mentioned, that Canadian Breitbart that actually hired Lauren Southern for many years. They're trying to keep a form of plausible deniability, I think. And for the longest time in Canadian history, being socially conservative was considered uncouth, was considered not something you could do. It was the third rail of Canadian politics, which no one was touching. But it seems that things might be changing. And now conservatives seem to be touching that third rail of politics, and it seems to be helping them more than it hurts them. That sucks. Jeez. What are we going to do? I think the number one thing that we need to do as Canadians is realize that we are not exempt from the growing tide of hatred and racism that's going to lead to fascist movements. It's going on around the world, and Canada is not some special place where this is never going to happen. It can happen here. We need to keep track of these groups. There are wonderful social media platforms that analyze and look at hate groups in Canada. I think one of the best one is the Twitter account @VestsCanada, a really good follow to keep abreast of the growing fascist movement in Canada. And the last one is support our troops, the Antifa troops, the people who are literally putting their lives on the line to protect marginalized people in the society. This is just gonna be great times. Great times. All right, everyone, thank you so much. If you want to help me make more videos like this, or some of the weird ones that are going to come out in the future, you should go to my Patreon, patreon.com/stepbackhistory, or make a one-time donation at paypal.me/stepbackhistory. They both help quite a bit, especially now that I'm flying solo and being a full-time YouTuber. Every month is going to be a little bit anxious, but if you can't help financially, I completely understand. That makes sense. Please, if you can, share this video or a video that you liked with a friend or a community that you think would enjoy it. It would really help. All right, everyone, because of VidCon, next week's Quick Step might be a couple days late, so just a heads up on that. I'll see you guys later.